In the beautiful village of Nsukka lived a young girl named Amara who lives with her grandmother. Her mother gave birth to her as a teenager, but unfortunately died due to complications. So, Amara was raised by her grandmother, Nne. Nne, who had once been a loving woman, became hardened by her daughter's untimely death. Her heart, which was once soft, grew rough, and she never looked at Amara without a mix of sorrow and bitterness. As such, from a very tender age, Amara became exposed to hardship. Amara noticed other children of her age in the village and how their grandmothers would cuddle and laugh with them, braid their hair, and even give them food. But she got none of those. Rather, she was baited with scorn, harsh words, and more often than not, an empty plate. It became clear to Amara that her grandmother did not like her, but what she didn't know was that it was much deeper than just dislike. Nne resented Amara and held a deep grudge against her. She believed that Amara was the reason her daughter died and would not spare any opportunity to accuse Amara. "You are the reason she is gone," she would say scornfully. "If not for you, my daughter would still be here. She would have brought honor to this family." Each time Amara heard those words, it broke her heart and filled her with guilt. She had never seen her mother, neither did she experience the love of a mother, and yet the only person with a direct connection to her mother had turned her into a perpetual enemy and had sworn to make life unbearable for her. Nne would starve her and put her through so much stress for her age. Most mornings, Amara would be sent to fetch water from the distant river, carrying a clay pot that was twice her size. The journey there was tough, as the paths were filled with stones and sharp turns. Sometimes she would slip, spilling the water she had managed to fetch, and she knew that Nne's wrath awaited her back home. As Amara grew, it seemed that Nne's hatred for her grew too. People would always wonder why Nne had so much hatred for the only family she had, but they dared not confront her. One day, Nne decided to declutter the house. She went into every room, bringing out items that had not been used for a very long time. And as she was in the room that was once her late daughter's, she found a small diary. Out of curiosity, she picked it up and opened to read. But as she read, hot tears dropped down from her eyes. It was her late daughter's diary, and in there, she had written the plans and big dreams she had for her life. Nne felt heartbroken and wept bitterly. "If only you were still here. If only you hadn't gotten pregnant. If only that cursed child took your life. If only she had gone instead of you. I told the doctors to save you. I told them to concentrate on you." Well then, since she decided to stay in your place, I will make her pay dearly for all she prevented you from doing for me. She will do them by hook or crook. With that, Nne's mind began to think of what to do. The next day, Amara had just returned from fetching water when Nne saw her, and an evil idea occurred to her. Amara was only 8 years old by now, and Nne noticed that she had started experiencing puberty signs. She noticed her body parts were becoming matured, and an evil idea occurred to her. Since Amara killed her daughter and ruined her chance of enjoying the fruits of her daughter, she would make Amara pay. Amara would make her a lot of money. She thought of how to go about it, and after a lot of idle thoughts, she decided to take the first step. One night, as Amara was sleeping, Nne came in and sat by her bed. Amara jolted up in fear and trembled nervously as she saw the evil dark look in Nne's eyes. Amara was used to Nne's presence that smelt nothing short of witchcraft, but tonight felt different. "You are almost a woman now, aren't you?" Nne muttered. Amara looked up confused. She was only a little girl, so she did not understand what Nne meant by being a woman. "Why are you looking at me like a moron? Take off your clothes and lie down," Nne barked. Amara was still confused but fearfully obeyed her grandmother. Nne then took a wooden spatula and without thinking twice, forced it in between Amara's legs, causing the little girl to shout out in horror. After what seemed like an endless moment of torment, Nne finally let Amara go. She threw a pack of painkillers at her to help with the pain before returning to her room. Amara did not understand what was happening. What did her grandmother do to her? She prayed silently that it would be the last. But unfortunately for Amara, this was the beginning of the twist her destiny had taken, because from that day, Nne would come every other night and repeat the same thing. Nne's evil plan was for her to disvirgin Amara by herself and make her wide enough for the men who she would soon start to pimp her out to. Amara was helpless. Even though she dreaded the moment her grandmother would come up to her, she couldn't do anything. She would cry and beg, but Nne would ignore her tears and continue doing what she came for. This continued going on for a long time, and by the time Amara was 10 years old, Nne believed it was time to start bringing in the men. One evening, a strange man visited their house, and Nne brought him into Amara's room. He had the face of a hawk with sharp eyes, and his eyes lingered on Amara for too long. Amara curled up on the bed, shivering. She felt a prickling sensation in her spine and instinctively moved closer to the wall, wishing she could disappear. "This is the girl," Nne said to the man with a smirk. "She will be your little toy. Show her what she needs to know." Amara's eyes widened as the man reached out to her. She wanted to scream, but she knew it wouldn't make a difference. No one would hear. No one would even care to come. Nne left them alone, closing the door behind her, and minutes later, a loud scream was heard from Amara. Nne sat in the living room, looking pleased and fulfilled, counting the money she had collected from the man. This was what she had long waited for. This was only what mattered to her, and in fact, her mind was already thinking of the next client she would bring. And that was how Nne started to bring men to sleep with Amara in the house. She would collect money from them and push Amara to them. After the act, she would always give Amara some blood-flushing herbs so as to prevent any unwanted things in her body, such as pregnancy or infections. This continued, and soon Amara became used to it. She grew up into a teenager and still slept with men for money. Every other day, Nne would arrange the men and Amara would offer herself like a sacrificial lamb. To make matters worse, Nne totally exploited her by collecting all the money the men gave. She didn't bother to take proper care of Amara or provide for her needs, apart from giving her food and medication to ensure that she was in good condition for the business. At 16 years old, Amara became wild and now began to go after these men by herself. She would sneak out of the house and go meet the men she had booked appointments with. This was how she was able to get little money without Nne's knowledge. By now, everyone in the village already knew what Nne and her granddaughter were doing, and even though they condemned their actions, they could do little or nothing to stop it. No one knew the foundations that had been laid before Amara became this way. And so, even when some well-meaning villagers tried to talk to Amara about how she was living her life, she would listen patiently to them with innocent eyes. But then, after they finished talking, she would only smile sadly and walk away. They didn't understand. No, they don't. What do they expect her to do? She should live this lifestyle? What else would she do? What else did she know how to do? She knew no other life apart from this, and so it was best for her to continue like this. Apart from the money she got from this lifestyle, with which she survived, there was an underlying issue that no one knew about, not even Nne. Amara had noticed that she couldn't stay for one day without meeting a man. She noticed it one certain time when Nne traveled. Normally, the times Nne traveled were when Amara could rest and have a little peace. But this time around, it was different. The first night alone was a battle. Amara lay down to sleep, but she tossed and tossed, feeling uncomfortable. She didn't understand what was happening to her, but then she felt an unusual urge. She tried to force herself to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Not knowing what else to do, she went out to sit under the night's chilly breeze, and then she noticed a young man walking alone. With the speed of light, Amara ran towards him and grabbed him. The young man was caught off guard, but then he understood the message being passed, and so he went in with Amara into the house. After the man left, Amara slept calmly within minutes, and it was then that it dawned on her that she had become addicted to this. No matter how she tried to fight it, to control herself, Amara couldn't. This was now a part of her reality. And her wicked grandmother, who had led her into this, was not even bothered. Rather, she enjoyed it and would even force Amara to give her the money she made behind her. Nne knew that Amara was going about the village sleeping with different men for money, and whenever she sees her returning, she would stretch out her hand and ask Amara to submit the money she got from the men. At first, Amara willingly submitted the money. She was still very much scared of her grandmother and feared for what she would do to her. But as time went on, Amara began to resent her grandmother and would often think of the several evil things she wanted to do to her. If only this woman can just die and leave me to enjoy my life. After all, she has eaten enough from me. She collects all the money I make with my body, my own body. No, I need to put a stop to this. I won't let her continue to exploit me. And then, one afternoon, Amara had sneaked out as usual, and she made a reasonable sum of money that day. But as she approached the house, she saw her grandmother sitting in front of the house in her usual manner, looking like one who was prepared for war. Amara paused in her steps, and then, at that instant, an idea struck her. Without thinking twice, she quickened her steps and walked up courageously towards Nne. As usual, Nne stood up and stretched out her hands. "Who are you looking at with that kind of eyes? Submit the money quickly," Nne commanded. But Amara glared at her angrily. "No, never, not anymore. I will not tolerate your wickedness anymore." Nne froze for a moment. She looked at Amara and then burst out into laughter. "When did the butterfly grow into an eagle? Come on, don't waste my time. Give me the money now." But Amara stood firm, and then, just as Nne charged at her to beat her as usual, Amara ducked and quickly grabbed a stick on the floor. She targeted Nne's head and gave her 2 hard hits on the head. It took Nne unawares, and she fell to the ground unconscious. But to make matters worse, as she fell backwards, and the back of her head hit on a very big stone lying on the floor. All this happened within seconds, and even Amara herself was terrified. She had not expected it to be like this. She looked at her grandmother and saw that she was not moving. Amara looked around, checking if anyone had seen her. She then went into the house and quickly searched everywhere. She saw some money in her grandmother's room and added it to the one she already had. Without wasting time, Amara fled the village, going straight to the park to board a bus going to Enugu. Amara arrived Enugu that night with a small bag she had packed, and she stood at the busy park, confused, not knowing where to go. In her 20 years on earth, this was the first time she would be outside her village, and it felt so scary and strange. She had heard stories of Enugu town and how everyone was a suspect, so she held on tightly to her bag for fear of being robbed. She turned right and began to walk cautiously, and then she came to a place where she saw several girls standing in a queue, waiting for what she had no idea of. Amara studied them from a distance, and she knew that from the way they were dressed, they were there for a special occasion. The girls were dressed in provocative and skimpy attires that advertised specific areas of their bodies. Amara went closer and tapped on one of them. "Sister, good evening. Please don't be offended. What is happening here? Why are you people standing here?" The young lady, who was chewing gum too loudly, looked at Amara amused. "Where are you from?" "Certainly not from this planet. So you see ladies like us sampling ourselves on the road and you are asking what we are doing here? Okay, we came to play football. Our coach is arranging the field." Amara felt embarrassed. She asked an honest question, but obviously the people in the city were not that kind. Just then, a car slowed down, and much to Amara's shock, she saw the ladies run towards the car, shouting and trying to convince the driver to pick them. "Wait, is this really what they are doing here? So they are prostitutes. But why do they have to struggle for only one man? Are men scarce here? This is serious. So look at the way they are fighting themselves. Meanwhile, in Nsukka, it is the men who fight themselves for me. It can't be that bad now. Maybe I should go and join them. After all, what else do I know how to do?" With that, Amara went and stood beside the ladies to grab a client. But before she knew it, one of the girls raised an alarm. "Who is this intruder? Who sent you?" The other ladies too came to where Amara was and started to shout at her, pushing her away from their spots. Amara was shocked and confused and quietly went away. As she stood away from them, wondering where she would go, the same lady she had spoken to earlier came to meet her. "It seems you're new here. You're new to town, right? Don't you know that you can't just join in anyhow? We are business people and we have associations. You must fall under someone. Every spot marked is under the jurisdiction of someone. So you need to have a madam who will direct you to your spots. If you want, I can introduce you to our madam." Amara looked at the lady bewildered. Association? Anyway, she did not mind as long as she was allowed to join the business like others. "Thank you very much. I would like to meet your madam," Amara replied. The lady then took her to a very large compound filled with several face me I face you apartments. There were clotheslines everywhere filled with several female underwears of different sizes and colors. It was obvious that the compound was meant for women only. Amara was taken into one of the rooms and introduced to Madame Pepe. Madame Pepe scrutinized Amara, and after asking her basic questions about herself, she took her into one of the rooms and told her to get ready for her test. Amara nodded and dropped her bag to the floor. She sat on the bed quietly waiting for whatever the test was. 30 minutes later, Madame Pepe came in with a man. "Amara, it is time to show what you've got. Your performance will determine if you will join our association or not," Madame Pepe said and left the room, leaving Amara alone with the man. 4 hours later, the man ran out of the room shouting. Madame Pepe, who had slept off, heard the noise and came out to know what the problem was. "Hey John, what is the problem? Did the girl do anything funny?" she asked curiously. But John looked at her with dull and weak eyes, and when he spoke like one who was at the verge of fainting. "Madame Pepe, that girl, where did you bring her from? She's fire. She won't get tired, neither would she stop. Out of all the girls you have brought to me to test their mileage, this one is unbeatable. Is she human at all?" Madame Pepe looked at John quietly, trying to understand what he was saying. Just then, a mischievous smile formed on her lips. "Are you trying to say she's good? I just hit a jackpot then. And you look like a fish. Go and take your herbs before you faint." Madame Pepe then went to meet Amara in the room and was surprised to see her sitting on the bed as if she didn't just do anything. She looked as innocent as anything. "Amara, so you are this good. Congratulations, you are now a part of us. Now listen, I rule over this place, so everyone, including you, has to abide by my rules. For every client you get, I own 80% of the money. I feed, clothe, house and protect you, so that percentage is fair for me to get. Since you are this good, you won't have to go out like the rest. You will stay here and attend to my VIP clients whenever they come. If you are good and obedient, I'll be good to you too. Do you understand me?" Amara nodded and then thanked her. The next morning, Amara was woken up by the same lady who had introduced her to the brothel. Her name was Gift, and she had heard about Amara's performance. "No way, Amara. So you are this good and you were acting like a novice. Where did you learn it from? Who trained you?" Amara sat up on the bed and was confused at Gift's questions. "What are you talking about?" Gift rolled her eyes. "Don't play dumb, Amara. Who trained you? How were you able to tire out John? Nobody has done that before." Amara finally understood what she meant, and she smiled bitterly. "Haven't you heard of the saying, what is worth doing is worth doing well? This is what my life is, so I should be able to do it well." Gift frowned. "That sounds weird. Anyway, whatever that means, I need to catch some sleep. We just got back. Bye." Amara smiled as Gift left. She looked around the room and sighed sadly. This is life to her. This is all she had ever known how to do. She was grateful to be finally free and be out of her grandmother's cage. But what she did not know was that Madame Pepe would even be a worse host than her grandmother, and she was about to repeat the same cycle of exploitation and objectification she thought she had escaped. What would Amara's fate be under Madame Pepe? Would she ever be able to break free from such reality? This and many more questions will be answered in the next part of the story. So subscribe to the channel and watch out for part 2.